everybody. So we have people listening in the webinar and people who are also listening on YouTube. So for anyone who doesn't know and who doesn't know who Anita Moorjani is, she is the author of 5 books, including the New York Times best-selling book, Dying to Be Me, and that put her on the map. And she very famously went through a near-death experience. And after lapsing into a coma when she was dying and battling unsuccessfully with cancer, she came back and immediately healed. And she had a very long near death experience and really came back to and lived to tell the tale and can educate us all about the greater consciousness. She's one of those amazing people who has gone around the world talking to people about this and also living that extraordinary life here on earth. So, welcome, Anita. She's also my great pal, too.
Thank you, Lynn. Thank you for the beautiful introduction, and I'm so thrilled to be here. I'm so grateful you invited me. It's an honor. Thank you.
Thank you. It's an honor to spend time with you, and we bump into each other when we do events around the world. We just saw each other in Toronto a few months ago, so this gives us an opportunity to dive deeply. So, please give everybody who doesn't know a little précis of what happened to you when you were dying from cancer.
So I was dealing with lymphoma, which is cancer of the lymph glands, which had spread throughout my lymphatic system over a period of 4 years. I had tried different ways of healing on and off, and some of them worked, but over 4 years, overall, I was on a steady decline. And then I finally reached a point where I was terminal, where the doctors said I was at the final stages. It was the end stages. It was what they call stage 4B. And they said that I was not going to make it through the night. I was in the hospital. I was not going to make it through the night. And I went into a coma. And they told my family that I was not going to come out of the coma. So this was back in 2006, February the 2nd, 2006. And I was about 42 years old, and I was in the coma. And the state of my body was that the cancer had spread throughout my lymphatic system. I had tumors, many of them the size of golf balls, from the base of my skull, all around my neck, under my arms, in my breasts, all the way down to my abdomen. My lungs were filled with fluid, which consistently had to be drained every couple of weeks. Because of the fluid in my lungs, I wasn't able to lie flat. I always had to prop myself up because I would choke on my own fluid if I lay flat. I had open skin lesions where toxins were weeping out of my skin. I weighed 85 pounds. I looked like a skeleton, but because my body wasn't absorbing nutrition, that's why I only weighed 85 pounds. But because of that, my muscles had all atrophied and deteriorated. So I wasn't even able to stand up anymore or walk. In fact, I didn't even have the strength to hold my head up. My head was always hanging down like that. So it just took too much effort even to hold my head up if I was sitting. I was in so much pain and so much discomfort. And in the hospital, I was connected to a heart rate monitor, a food tube, nutrition tube, oxygen, just all kinds of tubes and machines. And now I was in a coma, and the doctors were telling my family these were my final hours, and I was not going to make it through the night. But as my body lay lying there on the hospital bed, and for all intents and purposes, I appeared to be in a coma, I was actually aware of everything that was happening to me. Even though my physical eyes were closed, I could see, hear, and feel everything that was happening around my physical body. And I could feel, it was strange because I could feel the emotions of everyone in the room, including not just my family, but also the doctors, the nurses. I could feel what they were feeling. I could feel their hopelessness and their resignation that there was just nothing more they could do for me, and I was now dying. And my family were, of course, distraught. But for me, it felt like I had left my body and I was now feeling light and free, and I felt incredible. I just felt incredible. Nothing like I had ever felt in my physical body. All the pain was gone, the discomfort was gone, the fear was gone. But I was aware that my family were sad and suffering and distraught, and I wanted them to know, don't be sad for me. I feel really incredible. It's amazing. And it just felt so good to be without a body. Um, and the thing is, what I soon started to realize is that I could not communicate with them because we have no biology. I had no vocal cords. Also, another thing to note is that because we have no biology, we don't have physical eyes. So the awareness is different from just having sight because with your eyes, you're kind of focused. You look one way or the other way, and you have limited vision of what you can see. With this just conscious awareness, with no physical body, it's not like you can't see because you don't have eyes. It's more like your perception is limitless. So it's like you can see, hear, and feel everything that pertains to you. And it was like I had 360-degree peripheral vision, but no limit on the distance, and walls were not limiting me. I could hear, so I was able to hear conversations that my husband Danny was having with the doctors outside my room, down the hallway at a nurse's station. And I heard them telling him that these are her final hours and she's not going to make it through the night. I was aware that my brother was flying in from a different country on a plane, and I was aware that I wanted to at least try and stay alive, physically alive, until he got here because I knew he would be distraught if he felt it was too late. At least I should be alive when he got here. So I was consciously trying to keep my body alive, at least until my brother got in. Um, I was aware of other lifetimes I'd had with the people around me, my mom, my brother, my husband, Danny. I was aware of other beings that it felt like they were there to help me through this transition. I recognized,
Like other beings, you mean like angels, like other light beings, things like that?
yes, light beings. They were all light beings, and some of them I recognized as my own deceased loved ones. But I didn't recognize all of them, but they were there to help me and guide me. So they were, they could have been guides, spirit guides, and angels, and beings that I didn't recognize, maybe from before, maybe ancestors from before this physical life. But there were a lot of them, and it was almost like they were all there just loving me unconditionally, and like they were there to help me through this transition. But it also felt like they were cheering me on. They were congratulating me. Now, I had always been afraid of death, like so afraid of death and what happens in the afterlife. I had been conditioned because my parents are Indian, Hindu. I'd been conditioned to believe in karma. I didn't know what karma awaited me. I didn't know, I was always scared of creating a negative afterlife. I was always doing things to make sure that I was a good person and that I would have a really good afterlife and have really good karma. I was also a people pleaser, a doormat. Um, but here I was on the other side, feeling nothing but unconditional love, almost as though, and I'm not giving people permission or anything to do whatever they like, but it really felt like no matter who I am and what I did, I was still loved unconditionally by the light beings on the other side. That I started to understand that I had been trying too hard, and the brand of spirituality that I had learned had turned me into someone that was working way too hard to please too many people and to please too many gods and afterlife beliefs and spiritual beliefs. And I needn't have worried about any of that. I was loved unconditionally, regardless. And it was like they were celebrating my return. And, I had always grown up to believe that I had to worship all the beings of the other side, God, gods, whatever we want to say. I'd grown up to worship and respect and fear God or gods, fear the other side. And we always stayed good because we feared the afterlife. When I crossed over, not only did I realize that there was nothing to fear, I also realized that the people on the other side, no matter how major the beings were, whether we want to call it God or source or angels, we didn't need to revere them. They didn't need that from us. They revered us. And for me, that was a big revelation because they felt we're the ones doing the hard work here.
And truly that is. Let me ask you a few questions about that. How long were you dead?
I was in the coma. I was actually in the coma for about 30 hours. So,
Okay. And what brought you back? So you were in there 30 hours. It was delightful there. It was better than you'd ever expected, far better than Earth. So what brought you back?
yeah,
Did you have a
so
great longing to stay? And what finally brought you back?
I really wanted to stay there. I reached a point where I was given a choice. And I encountered my dad, who was there to greet me and also help me. And I reached a point where I was given a choice as to whether I wanted to come back or to stay there. No part of me wanted to come back because my body, I was suffering. I just didn't want to come back to a sick and dying body. And but then I was being shown that it wasn't my time and I still had things to do here and I had some gifts waiting for me and things that I apparently had intended to come and do but hadn't completed yet. I also learned that my husband Danny and my purpose was linked, and if I didn't come back he wouldn't be able to complete his purpose either. But I felt, what's the point of coming back into a sick and dying body? And that's where my dad stepped in, because my entire life, it was my dad who instilled fear in me, fear of everything, fear of disapproval, because he never approved of me. So I spent a lifetime trying to win his approval. I spent a lifetime thinking I was not good enough. So my entire life was spent being a doormat, trying to win people's approval, fearing the afterlife, fearing I wasn't a good person. And what I started to understand is that I had never been myself. I'd never loved myself. I didn't even know I was supposed to love myself. I always thought I had to be in service to other people. I'd always been in service, like, say, trying to please my dad. And I was brought up to believe that, that you live with your parents until you get married, and then you're in service to your husband as a woman from the culture that I'm from. And I never knew that my needs mattered and I matter and I'm supposed to love myself. And my soul came here with an intention to be all that it can be. And when I started to understand that, it was my dad who said, all you have to do is be yourself fearlessly and your body will heal. And what I started to understand was that my entire life, my dad was the one that had instilled fear in me, which led to my detriment, my sickness. And now, so in life, my dad had instilled fear in me. And now in death, he was releasing me from that fear. So,
Wow.
and I failed to mention my dad had died 10 years prior to me having this experience. And so, as soon as he said, all you have to do is go and live your life fearlessly, and your body will heal. He said, now that you know the truth of who you really are, you need to just go back and live your life fearlessly. And that's when I decided to come back, and my eyes started to open and I started to come out of the coma. And sure enough, my body started to heal. The tumors started to shrink, and the doctors couldn't explain it. They were shocked. My family were elated. And here I am.
What a story, Anita. And there's so much to unpack from this. So, what we're going to do now, I think I wanted everybody to hear your extraordinary story. I want to unpack some things about greater consciousness and talk to us about accessing that consciousness, because by doing that, first of all, you've told everybody in this audience, don't worry about dying. It's pretty fabulous. And
Yeah.
secondly, though, that it's a learning thing, that you kind of get your ultimate knowledge on the other side. And so I'm interested in accessing that. So I want to talk a little bit about some of what I've seen in group intention, because what I've seen is essentially a situation where we are also accessing a greater consciousness. We're going to talk a little bit more about this, about what is consciousness, the big question. But what it seems to be is number one, limitless, and something that doesn't die. So I'll just throw in here a bit of science. There has been so much evidence to demonstrate that consciousness doesn't die. There's from the work of Dr. Raymond Moody, who began collecting stories like Anita's back in the 1980s, to scientists and doctors like Dr. Pin van Lommel, who again started cataloging cases he had of heart attack victims who were dead for a while, who had near death experiences and came back, and they were all unexplainable. And the main thing he said, like Anita, is people had consciousness always, even when they were clinically dead, when their brain wasn't working, when their heart had stopped beating. They still had information that they could describe afterward of exactly what happened after they had passed. They knew who was in the room, they knew the nurses coming in and out. One guy even said, after dying, could you, when he came back, could you tell that blonde, that nice young blonde nurse who took away my false teeth and my clothes when you were trying to revive me, that I'm better now and you can bring it all back? This is after he was declared dead. So there's so much evidence, as well as people like Dr. Gary Schwartz, who's done the most remarkable set of experiments over the years called the afterlife experiments, where he has a medium connecting with somebody who is dead, and he usually uses as the information source for the medium a stand-in, so they can't say somebody is cueing that medium. And he's been able to bring back extraordinary detailed evidence about people who have passed. And even Konstantin Korotkov, who measures light coming out of human bodies, has measured newly dead cadavers and found that light carries on for days and days, as though it's making some transition. Even,
Wow.
even EEG recordings of a guy they had who was on an EEG machine, died. They didn't realize it. They kept recording it for a couple of days, and they found brainwave activity as normal after the guy was dead, after there was no brainwave activity, after there was no heart activity. All this kind of evidence demonstrates that we're still carrying on. But here's the interesting thing, is consciousness. So it doesn't die. So it's not locked in the head. So it's got to be out there all the time and in here all the time. So how are we accessing it? So I'm going to talk a little bit about the power of eight and what I've seen. Because what I've seen most of the time with power of eight groups is an altered state of consciousness. I like to call it like a psychic internet, where people come together and they talk about mystical states, and the brainwaves even change. We've recorded them, and we see extraordinary changes in the brain, the parts of the brain that make us feel separate and less, and worry, are involved with worry, doubt, negativity, are all dialed down. But the parts of the brain that make us feel connected and unified and all one are all enhanced. So we're all in a state of ecstatic oneness. And for me, that's where the miracles start. So I'm really interested about you coming back and getting healed right away. So you came back, your dad had told you live life fearlessly. Do you think the experience itself, not just the exhortations of those light beings and people on the other side, but the experience of near death stuff, it's almost like you touched the skirt of God, the hem of God. Did you feel like that when you came back and you just miraculously healed?
Oh yes, I felt invincible. I felt um, like I could do anything and nothing could kill me. Like I knew it wasn't my time. I knew nothing was going to kill me unless my soul or my soul, unless my soul wanted to die. Nothing outside of me could kill me. That's what it felt like. Um, I felt absolutely invincible, unstoppable is the word that comes to mind. And it was interesting also some of the things you said about consciousness. Like I was saying, I would say to my husband things like, "Isn't that the doctor that said I'm not going to make it through the night?" And he said, "You couldn't possibly have heard that. He didn't say it in the room. He said it down the hallway at the nurse's station." So a lot of that was happening, which was shocking people around me. And the doctors literally could not make of what was going on. I was calling people by name who I had never seen before, who had just come to take maybe to draw blood or to put a needle in my veins while I was in the coma. And they would come in the room after I was out of the coma, and I would call them by name, and they would say, "How do you know? How do you know me? You've never seen me before." And I said, "Yeah, but you came in while I was in the coma." And they said, "Yes, but you were in the coma." So there was a lot of that happening that was kind of interesting for people. And the funny thing, though, in the state I was in, it's like for a while you have one foot on each side. And so I was saying to my family, "Dad is here, Dad's here, he's right here, he's looking out for all of us." And then I would say, "There's no veil between this side and the other side. Even though we can't see it, they're all right here." And so, because I was living in this one foot on each side for quite a while, things that were making sense to me wasn't making sense to anyone else, but I was almost speaking it as if it should make sense to everyone because it seemed so normal to me when I said, "Why was the doctor surprised that I knew his name?" Or why were they surprised when I said that? For me, it was so natural and obvious. And it took a while for me to realize, oh, my body was completely closed off. It was not here. I was not here. But it took a while for it all to make sense.
So your consciousness, the thing that you were seeing out of, even though you weren't seeing out of eyes, was this all seeing element that was still happening. At the moment of death, was there any change? Or did you still feel, aha, I'm the eye and I'm seeing out there, even though you couldn't see with physical eyes? So in
There
other
was
words, there was no line in the sand that was before and afterward. You just had a continuation of consciousness.
It was a continuation. So this is what I have heard. So in my case, it wasn't a boom and I'm out of my body. It was a gradual. And what I have heard from researchers like Raymond Moody. They have, and there's another one, Dr. Jeffrey Long. What they believe is that because I had a slow decline into death, mine, there was no absolute line in the sand. It was a slow decline. I didn't have the whoosh through the tunnel and out of my body. Like what they felt is that people who have a sudden death, like a car crash, a heart attack, those are the ones who really feel that delineation of
Mhm.
being going from in the body to out of the body. But because I was already so weak and in so much pain and I was deteriorating, and I would find it hard to even stay awake towards the end. And then I went into a coma. It was like a gradual exit of my body.
I think that's a bit like Evan Alexander, too, who was in a coma. So there's probably something different. And I was fascinated by Konstantin Korotkov's measurements of light with these newly dead people, because just as you say, the method of their death determined the light. So people who had had an abrupt transition, so they were in a car crash and suddenly died, they had a kind of a sharper um,
Yes.
uh, uh, kind of light coming out of their body, a different kind of signature than people who had had a slow death or people who had died from an illness or something like that. Murders were even different too. So that whatever method you died seemed to determine the light and perhaps had something to do with the consciousness, as you're saying. So what I'm also interested in is the healing thing, because I know people like Joyce Hawkes. I met her once. She spoke at a conference of ours years ago, and she had had a near death experience when a big, heavy picture on her wall fell down and hit her in the head. And she came back as a healer. She said she suddenly had this healing ability. And so there is something. So you got immediately healed. She had a healing ability. So there is something, as I say, about experiencing that greater consciousness that seems to enhance the healing ability. Did you have any feelings about that, Anita?
So what I feel that it does, an experience like this, what it does is it opens a door, but it opens you up to who you were meant to be. In my case, I realized that um, I'm I do feel that it opened the door for me to be highly intuitive, but I believe I always was, but I had repressed it. So this is what I feel based on my experience and everything I learned on the other side is that there is so much that is actually available to us. Like we have a lot of gifts. We are naturally intuitive. We are natural born healers. But this physical world, our beliefs, um, the way we worship um, science and science is good, but I wish science would be more focused on, I wish more people would be interested. What the work you do is amazing, Lynn, and I wish more people would do what you do, is really use scientific research to research phenomena like this to make it more believable and widely available. What I'm finding is that we have a leaning more towards debunking than to actually propagating this as being true. So what I discovered is here I am, I've had this happen to me in a hospital. I have proof, I have the medical records, the doctors couldn't explain it. Um, I've had people go through my medical records and say, whichever way I look at it, you should be dead. You shouldn't have come out of that. Your body should not have healed. There were way too many cancer cells. People who are looking through it with a fine-tooth comb say this. But yet, once you go out and take this story into the world, There are so many people that are so ready to take this away from you. It's not even that. So as far as I'm concerned, I tell people that that if you're not ready to believe it, it's fine, because I'm not here to convince anyone. I don't convert people. I don't convince people. This has happened to me. I'm happy to not even share it, but somehow um, I was driven to share it, or at least to set the story free. So I put it on the internet, and Wayne Dyer discovered the story. But people, there are a huge faction of people, and more then than today, that it's not just that they don't believe you and they move on. It's not just that this is not their cup of tea and they move on. No, literally, there are people that will go on a crusade to try to take the miracle away from you and say, it was your mind, it was the drugs, were you misdiagnosed? And that's
Yeah.
not possible. And they give you a million reasons, and it's almost like they don't want you to have the miracle. So we're dealing with a huge number of people who still believe purely in material science, who still believe that we are five sensory, three-dimensional beings. But when you are born, you know you are a multi-sensory, multi-dimensional being. When you're born knowing that. And I'm just using the language and the words that I have available to me, because language is so limiting. But if you look at a baby can sense right away when their mother walks in the room whether she said anything or not. You look at our pets. Our pets know when we're coming home before they even see us, and they run up to the door to greet us. So we see it all around us. But when humans do it, we're like, oh, that was a coincidence. So we take it away right from when children are young enough to understand. We take that magic and those gifts away from them. And I feel that's actually what's wrong with the world. And when you have a near-death experience, you're like, holy moly, this is who I was meant to be. This is who I was born to be. That's what happened with me.
Absolutely. And everything you said, I mean, we live all the time with skeptics who have, it doesn't, each of my books has 400 plus references in it. And I still have skeptics oftentimes trying to debunk it, trying to debunk the intention experiments. And the problem is, as you say, the scientific story. It's outdated, the one that is still being followed. It's more than 300 years old. But I tell you, all of the work that I do demonstrates the extraordinary powers we're born with, that babies have, that you can cultivate. There is the power of intuition. There's the power of precognition. You all have the ability to remote view, and you all have the ability to heal your lives with intention. And in my new documentary, the Power of Intention that Gaia has just released, by the way, it's gaia.com/peace for anyone who wants to see it who hasn't, and it's totally free. We have documented so many intention experiments where we've got people around the world sending intention to lower violence, or make seeds grow faster, or make water purified, or to heal people. Now, we've got stories there of people who were, and I chose 3 of them that were really unassailable. One woman who was born with a genetic liver problem and was due for a liver transplant. 1 10-minute power of 8 intention. Her liver heals. She completely heals. Her spleen completely goes back to normal. She has 2 letters from medical specialists saying, you're fine. Your liver is healed, who have scanned her a few months after doing that with nothing else. Same thing with a woman who was going blind. She had retinal damage in both eyes. She went to multiple eye specialists. They all said, there is nothing we can do for you. She came on to my Power of 8 Intention Masterclass, had her own Power of 8 group doing small group healing for her. Bam, she now has 20/20 vision. There was no other medical intervention. And one other, who had scoliosis from birth and was in terrible pain. One 10-minute power bait intention, and her pain was gone. And it was gone. We checked up with her months later. It was still gone. And on and on. I have thousands of stories like this. People who have healed not only their health, but also their finances or career or relationships, their life's purpose. We have this greater consciousness that you're talking about, Anita, within us, naturally within us. And
Yes.
for you, it took dying to find this out. For a lot of other people, we don't, because we're surrounded by a skeptical press. We're surrounded by a skeptical everything. And as I say, we have skeptics all over the place trying to attack us. And even on the documentary, one of the scientists, several of the scientists say, you know, when you bring out new truths, you're going to get attacked. And the point is, just as you said, the people who want to hear this, are ready to hear this, are
Yes.
going to listen. The other people, I'm not writing for them. I'm not speaking for them. I'm not running courses for them. I'm running courses and speaking and writing for the people who want to hear this and are ready to hear this and want to hear about the new science. Because as you say, I like the science too, but I'm writing about cutting edge science, the stuff that you're not hearing about in the magazines and the newspapers. Let me
Yes.
let me talk to you about tapping into the greater consciousness here on Earth. But first, I wanted to ask little bit about light beings, because with our master classes, I've had this a lot where people talk about light beings behind them when they're doing power bait groups, small group intention, or when they're doing my giant intention experiments. Now, remember, with the experiments, a lot of power bait groups, they're virtual. So people are taking part in different places in front of their computers by themselves all over the world. And yet they're sensing kind of light beings there. They're talking about them being the magnifiers. One woman said, this was in a Power Bait group where they were in person. She said, there were light beings behind all of the chairs, and they were the magnifiers, and they were helping us with this. I'm so interested in that whole idea of light beings in our lives and helping us, being there to help us. Lots of people talk about aliens, but you experience them as angelic entities, really. Have you had anything like that in your earthly life since?
I feel since that experience, it opened a door and I have felt their guidance ever since. I understood that they were guiding me before, but I was never aware of it. We're all being guided, but we haven't opened the door. So it's not them that are not guiding us, it's us that are not open to that. But ever since that experience, I feel them, I hear them, they are guiding me, they're sending me messages, signals, signs all the time. And I talk to them. I ask them to show me signs and to guide me. And when we get quiet, so here's the thing. If we can take the time to meditate, and I don't like to call it meditate because that's such an overused word, but really it is a time to commune with your guides, your light beings that are looking out for you. And there could be many, or there could be a few, or they could change depending on what you're going through during your life. But when you take the time with intention to sit down and maybe light a candle and make sure there's nothing that's going to interrupt you, and you don't have any stresses, and you're not rushing for something, and you don't have like a hard deadline coming up in 30 minutes, where you really can just sit and relax, and then you start just giving all your issues over to them. um, I like to put a little bit of music on, meditation music, but then you start to get thoughts being dropped into your mind. And what I tell people is that you need to learn to trust the thoughts. However, your brain can sometimes interfere, and your brain will tell you, oh, you're imagining it, and this is just your imagination, or if it sounds too good to be true, it is. So here's the thing. All the negative thoughts, all the naysaying thoughts, or all the fearful thoughts, or all the discouraging thoughts are your brain. It's from the conditioning you received your entire life. Um, but all the thoughts that feel really uplifting. So the key is, how does that thought that's been dropped into your head, how does it feel for you? If it feels uplifting, then that is your guidance from them, and you have to trust it, because what they are trying to do every minute, every second of the day that they are with you, what they're trying to do is they are trying to uplift you. Because when you are uplifted, that's their only job, is to uplift it, is to uplift you. Because when you are uplifted, this is the only way that you can live your best possible life, or to live the highest version of who you are. Now, the world gives us fearful thoughts and debunks us, or there's naysayers, or there's a lot of doubting, and that's what the world does to us. Everything from mainstream media to social media to other people that don't want to see you succeed. Of course, not everyone. I don't want to paint a completely negative picture of the world, but our biggest enemy is our own minds naysaying and debunking or doubting ourselves. Um, and we get that from the conditioning of the world and of the people and of our culture. But because of this conditioning, it's very hard for us to be the best version of ourselves, to be the healthiest version of ourselves. And it's also harder for us to get the messages when we are in this state. And I call that the denser energy. So there's the dense energy, which is the doubting energy. And then there's the lighter energy, which is the love energy. So the more that you love yourself, this is why I always propagate self-love, because the more you love yourself, the more you're lifting your energy up, the more you'll hear their messages, the more they can communicate with us. And their job literally is to help us uplift our energy, so that when your energy is uplifted, your health is better. You attract different things. You live a better version of yourself. When you are uplifted, you are actually closer to who your soul is meant to be, who your soul came here to be. You're closer to living the intention you came here to live, just by being uplifted. So, so
Absolutely.
yeah, so when you are quiet and you're just receiving, they're trying to download messages into your mind all the time. And in the beginning, even if you're confused as to what's them, what's yours, it takes a little bit of practice. Just remember one thing. Um, they are trying to uplift you. So any positive thoughts you have, even if it feels too good to be true, even if you're thinking of miracles, magic, and then you go out believing that's true, you're better off believing that to be true. Even if you're wrong, you will actually create a better life for yourself just being in that energy space than debunking it and being right.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it really is the key. What they say is, what you think you attract. It is hard for all of us because we've been so conditioned and we're surrounded by all of that negativity all the time. As you say, we've got about 80,000 thoughts a day. And I've worked with loads of people and say, okay, we're gonna track your thoughts this week. And pretty much three-quarters of them to 80% of them are negative. And it's
Yeah.
everything from your hair looks bad, does my bum look big in this? My hair looks bad, and so much, and so on and so forth. one of the reasons, exactly what you said about staying uplifted, one of the reasons I'm so keen about community and groups and Power of Eight groups and doing intention in a group is just that thing about staying uplifted. Because it's so hard for us in this life now that we're surrounded with and the horrendous things of social media and the horrendous news every day to
Yes.
stay there in that sense of upliftedness. But I think that is, and I suppose this is part of being a girl. You know, you and I are in an area that is very much dominated by guys. And
Yes.
but being part of a girl, I think we see things a little differently. And one of the things I see about is that whole need for small community, people who have your back, who can help you. Because oftentimes, particularly women, you know, we are used to being of service. We're not used to rah-rahing ourselves. We're used to putting ourselves down. Our bum looks big in this. You know, we
Yes.
never, ever, ever, you know, there's a hilarious Jackie Mason sketch he did some years ago where he was talking about how women are always putting themselves down physically. And men, even if they're old and very fat, they've got a big beer belly, will look in the mirror and go, yeah, looking good. You know, just joking, guys who are listening out there. But the point is that we all need uplift. And so, one of the things that I've found about a Power of Eight group is you start out with a group of strangers and they become your angels on earth. Because, number one, as you get closer, when you do intention together, it gets stronger and stronger and stronger. And when you doubt yourself, they've got your back. So I noticed, for instance, there was this one woman who I think I'll call her Marcy, who could barely speak above a whisper and always felt, I don't deserve to be the center of the circle. I don't ever deserve to really have an intention said for me. As she went along working with this group over the year, she started realizing, well, okay, it's my turn. And all of those people were there for her to say, okay, Marcy, now it's your turn. And suddenly she started realizing, oh, I have a right to have an intention said for me. And it suddenly became um, a situation where she'd found her voice. She could speak. And then I think of Jerry, one of the guys who was in our master class, who came to this course when it was in the middle of COVID. So it was all lockdown. Nobody was seeing anybody. And so the groups meet virtually every week. And by the end, he said, I now know what love is. I've experienced more love in my life this year than I ever have, even in COVID. So even in lockdown, he'd have those people who had his back. When you have that group of like minded people, then you're safe to have our kind of beliefs. Then you're safe to explore the extra human potential we're all born with. So,
Yes.
and you know, community is, we need community more than we need to breathe. We really
Yes,
do. It
we do.
I found this amazing statistic showing people who do things for other people live two-thirds longer than other people. So there's a real key element here, not being a doormat, as you were saying, that was killing you, but all part of being something larger.